I live alone. I have for several years, and I have a house a little ways from the city. This happened a couple of years ago. One night, I was just relaxing, sitting on the couch and watching some TV. My living room has the couch at the back side of it, right next to the main window. This window looks out to the front yard and street. So as I was watching TV, I would occasionally casually look out the window. It was a nice and quiet night. By now, it was past 10 p.m., and we never really got much traffic on our street other than the neighbors who lived here. You see, to get to the nearest really busy street, you had to take about 3 quiet ones. So I remember I happened to notice headlights coming down the street out of the corner of my eye. When I did, I looked over to see the car. It very slowly drove by, and it was a dark-colored 4-door sedan. It was a little bit older as well, but I didn't recognize it as any of the neighbors. The car soon passed by though and kept on going down the street. I looked back to the TV, but probably about 1 minute later, I heard the car sound again. I looked to the street and noticed the same car driving down once again. It was like it took a lap, going to the next street over and then back to mine. This time, the car slowly passed by my house again, except now it went even slower, and then it pulled over to the side of the road a little ways past my place. It was in front of the house across the street and one over to the left. I assumed it to possibly be a friend of whoever lived there. After the car parked, I saw the doors open and then 3 men got out. They were pretty far away, so I couldn't see that well. But after the men got out, they appeared to all be wearing dark clothing. And not just that, but they also appeared to be wearing ski masks as well. I couldn't believe my eyes. Things got even worse as I watched the men walk across the street and then start to enter my yard. I quickly ducked down on the couch. I looked over and made sure that my front door was locked, which it was. Then I literally crawled across the living room so that they wouldn't see me. I made it to my hallway, and then I heard the men trying to open the front door. When it didn't open, I heard a knock, which I was not going to answer. About a minute or so later, I then heard a sound at the back door, of first somebody trying to open it, then knocking. I was positioned just inside of my hallway and near my bedroom. I had enough information to call the cops, so I took out my phone and I dialed 911. I didn't want to go into my bedroom or the guest bedroom though, because I thought that the men might try to break into either of them. And as I was on the phone with the police, I heard a knock at my bedroom window. The 3 men all seemed to be at different locations. I wasn't sure where to go, but I knew I needed to hide, so I went into this closet in the hallway. I kept mostly blankets and stuff in there. I went inside, closed the door, and covered myself. After being told the police would be there in a few minutes, I hung up. I was really hoping that the men would not break in, but my hopes and the back window were both shattered just moments later. I heard the crashing glass, and I realized that the men were getting inside of my house. I didn't know who they were or why they wanted to get in my house. I soon heard footsteps of the men walking inside, and then I heard them start talking to each other as well. I couldn't really make out most of what was being said though, but I did hear one of the men ask another if anybody was home. The footsteps moved around, and soon somebody entered the hallway. I kept as quiet as I could. Somebody went into my bedroom, and a short time later into the guest room. They got just feet away from the closet that I was in. I really thought that they were going to open it, but they never did. The intruders continued to walk around the house and communicate with one another. This went on for what to me felt like forever. But then, at one point, I heard one of the men say police. I didn't hear the context, but I wondered if the police had got there. The man didn't sound alarmed or panicked or anything. He kind of casually said it. But the men then walked towards the back door and then seemingly left pretty quickly. Things were then silent. About 30 seconds to a minute later, there was then a knock at the front door. I knew this had to be the police, so I left the closet and I ran for the door. I didn't see the men inside at all when I did. I saw an officer on the front step, and I opened the door and told him what happened. My entire house and property was searched. The men's car was still there parked on the side of the road, and within an hour, they were located several blocks away. It felt good knowing that they were caught. That was by far the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. I'm really glad that I was able to stay hidden. I live alone in a house and have lived here for 2 years now. This is an event that took place several months back and is still very fresh in my memory. So it was nighttime and I was alone in my house and in my bedroom. The house is not very large and my room is on the ground level. As I was watching TV and sitting on my bed, it was starting to get late and was maybe 11 or 12. Because it was late, things were very quiet aside from the volume on my TV, which was not that loud. All of a sudden, I heard this noise from the back end of my house. It sounded like maybe from the backyard, and it seemed like somebody had hit a back window. Before I could compute what was going on in my head though, I heard glass breaking. The sound was coming from the same area. Then I knew that somebody was breaking in. My first reaction at that point was to run to my bedroom door and lock it, which I did. I heard whoever had gotten in the house was still at the back side of it. Then my next course of action was to dial 911. I went over and located my phone, which was also on my bed. I quickly scrambled to dial for the police. Then I went to the back corner of my room. As soon as someone answered the phone, I said that my house was being broken into. I gave my address, but I spoke as quietly as I could. I didn't really hear anything during that time as far as where the intruder was, but maybe 30 seconds later, I heard the footsteps approaching the hallway where my bedroom is. Then, moments later, they arrived right outside my door. I muted the phone and tossed it aside in a panic. I didn't want them to hear me. Then, the intruder tried opening my bedroom door. That got me really scared because I had hoped that maybe they wouldn't want to be seen. I felt like they knew I was in here, but possibly they just wanted to see what was in the room. Maybe they just wanted to steal stuff. But now they were coming straight for me. After the door did not open from being locked, I heard a loud man's voice. He yelled for me to open the door now. It was very angry, and of course, I was not going to do that. After a few seconds, he banged on the door very hard 2 times. At that point, I just wanted to get out of there. I debated trying to open my bedroom window and jump out of it, or I could look around and see if I had anything to use as a weapon. I didn't really have much of anything though. I was heading over to the window and the guy started to walk away. Then I stopped. If he was leaving, I didn't want to run into him out of the house. I wasn't sure where he was going though or what he was doing, but I was just moving off of instincts at that point. My mind barely was even thinking at all. I don't even know how long this went on, but I was basically just pacing around and listening for the man. I didn't really hear much though. After I have no idea how long, I heard my back door opening. Then, probably like 30 seconds to a minute later, I heard noises out front. I still thought that it was the man, but it was actually the police. They came inside and I finally left my room. After searching the house, the man had left out the back door just a short time earlier. Some other cops searched the neighborhood and were able to find the man. He was caught just a block away, which made me feel 100 times better. I didn't know who he was or why he chose to break into my house. I'm really glad that my bedroom door had a lock on it though. If not, I'm not sure what would have happened. I have a 3-bedroom house that I live by myself in. It has 2 floors and a basement, and I really enjoy living here. The neighborhood is nice as well, and I've gotten to know several of the neighbors. Last year, something terrifying took place though. So I work pretty standard hours, although one of my bedrooms in the house I have converted into an office to get extra work done. I was gone at work one day though, and I got a phone call from my neighbor who lives directly across the street. His name is Dan, and he's retired. He's a really nice guy, but does not usually call me. I was wondering what was going on, and when I answered, Dan asked me if I was expecting anybody at my house that day. He knew that I was gone because my car that I drove every day was not in the driveway. I told him no. Why? Dan said that he had seen a man enter my yard and seemed to be at my front door for a while. Then the guy went around into the backyard. Dan said that it just looked really suspicious to him and he wanted to call me about it. He also mentioned that the man had gone into my backyard area about 5 minutes ago and he hadn't seen him since. He asked me if I wanted him to call the police. I told him yes, because I felt helpless being stuck at work. I figured it would be best for them to come out and look around. It was just strange for this to be happening in broad daylight. So Dan called the police and he told me that he would call me back with an update. I sat at my desk hoping that nobody would break into my place or anything. About 30 minutes later or so, Dan called me back. He said that the police looked around, but figured that the man had left. They said that all my doors were locked and windows appeared closed and fine. Nothing seemed out of place, and after searching my front and backyard, nobody was located. They figured the individual may have tried to enter and passed by to another property. Dan had never seen the guy come back around and leave. He also never saw where exactly the guy had come from. I felt a little bit better, but I was also really creeped out by the whole thing. So I left work and went home about an hour later. I got back, pulled into the driveway, and walked around my house. I wanted to see things for myself, and everything seemed fine. So I then walked over to the front door and went inside. Then I started to go through my normal after-work routine. I first went upstairs to change. When I got to my bedroom though, I opened the door and immediately saw something for a brief second. It was so fast I didn't know what it was at first. But then I realized that somebody was hiding behind my bed. I just barely saw part of them. I didn't say anything. I just left the room, ran back downstairs, and then left my house. I got into my car and called 911. I stayed there in my car for the next few minutes as I talked to the police. As I was sitting there in my car waiting, I saw a guy come running out of my front door and then went out into the street. Then he ran down it until he was out of my sight. The police got there several minutes later. I was able to give a decent description of the guy to them. They searched my house in case there were multiple people, but it was just the one guy. He ended up being located later that evening. I didn't know who he was, and I don't know why he chose my house. In my opinion, my place doesn't stand out at all. I'm hoping that nothing like that happens again. I live in a pretty populated neighborhood. Last year, I went to the fireworks at the city park nearby with some friends. Then I went back home and arrived at like 11 p.m. or so if I had to guess. It was fairly late, so I was pretty much just going to go right to bed. I went upstairs to my bedroom on the second floor. When I was doing this, I happened to glance out of a window. This overlooked part of the backyard. As I did, I saw this woman walking into the yard. Now, I had never seen her before, and some random person in your backyard is pretty weird, so I kept watching her and was hoping that she would leave. The woman then walked farther into my backyard and went out of my sight. She was heading for my back door area though. I moved and went to another window where I could see her. I watched her then go to the back door and try opening it. It was locked, thankfully. The thought occurred to me that perhaps the woman was drunk. Maybe she was at a 4th of July party and was trying to walk home or something. Probably she was just at the wrong house. She didn't really appear drunk the way she had been moving, but I was trying to be logical. So after trying the back door, she then knocked on a window. It appeared as though she was not going to leave, so I decided to let her know that she had to get off of my property. I walked downstairs. Just when I made it to the main floor though, I heard the sound of glass breaking. It was so startling that I instantly ran back up the stairs. Then I bolted from my room, went in, and locked the door. I heard footsteps downstairs, but it now sounded like there were two people. I heard a man's voice as well as a woman's, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. I locked my bedroom door and then heard the footsteps approaching the stairs area. Then I heard the man start to shout really loudly. I don't recall exactly what he said, but it was very threatening. It was basically that he knew somebody was home and I better show myself now. I'm not sure if he really knew that I was home from hearing me go upstairs or to my room, or if he was just saying that to see if anybody was home. But I wasn't going to show myself. I went to my window and scrambled to open it. Then I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. I knew that I had to leave the house. I didn't have a weapon or really anything to defend myself with. I never thought that my house would get broken into. The footsteps sounded like they were heading straight for my door, so I decided to jump out of the window. It was kind of a long drop, but it was doable. I hit the ground, rolled, and was overall fine, so I took off running. I went down the street until I felt safe and then called the cops. I waited for them, and when they arrived, they searched the house. Unfortunately, the man and woman criminal duo were gone. I gave the police the best information that I could, and they took evidence. I had several things stolen, but nothing too bad. I'm just glad that I was safe and I made it out of the house okay. That was a really scary experience. This happened to me when I was living in a university town. I had only a semester left while my friends had 2 semesters left in school. So I rented a room in a house with two guys I found on Craigslist. I know that sounds creepy, but that's not the creepy part. I went for a run one morning, came back to my house, and hopped in the shower. With shampoo in my hair, I heard banging noises coming from the front door. I figured that my two roommates, who were friends with each other, had friends coming over, and I didn't think anything of it at first. I continued my shower, but the banging didn't stop. It continued to get louder. I started to hurry things along and started to become concerned. By the end of my shower, I heard a big crashing sound. Quickly toweling myself off to go investigate, the door to my bathroom opened. In the doorway was a man I had never seen before. He was looking at my naked body up and down while I desperately covered myself up. I asked the only question that came to my mind. "Who are you?" He didn't answer. He continued to look at me like I was a piece of meat. I asked the next most logical question. "Are you here by yourself?" Another man slightly peeked his head from around the corner of the hallway. The first man told me to get on the ground. I said no, and he hit me open-palmed in the face. He then said to me, "Do you want to die?" I had never been hit before. During the recoil after his hand connected with my face, time had slowed down. During that split second, I experienced the most intense fear in not knowing what to do next, not knowing what to do safely to get myself out of the situation. I was in this alone is what I thought. My cell phone was in my bedroom. My only plan was to get out of the bathroom and get to my phone. I tried leaving the bathroom, and this is where my memory fades and has only been filled in from what others have told me. My roommates had just gotten home from morning class and saw the front door busted in, so they knew something was wrong. They came up the stairs when they heard me screaming, "No, no, no." The first man grabbed me, but when he saw my roommates, he let go of me. The man demanded that my roommates give back his money. My roommates told the man, "We don't have your money." My roommates had never met or seen these guys in their life before. They must have been drugged up on something and got the wrong house if someone did owe them money. After my roommates told them the cops were on the way, which was a lie since they hadn't been called at that point, the men left out the front door. This is where my memory begins again. I fell to the ground sobbing uncontrollably. My face in the floor, I curled up like a bug and cried for a while. Once I regained control of my body, I went into my room and called my mom. I could barely get the story out to her by the time the police came. I had to throw on some clothes and talk to them outside. The banging and crashing noises were the two men kicking the original 1920s door in half to gain entry. It only took them a few minutes. I told the police what I remembered, which was minimal. They took DNA from fingerprints from the bathroom door. The police said they would do their best, but I never heard anything back, so I'm guessing that means they didn't find the men. Now, even if I'm home alone, I always lock the bathroom door or my bedroom door when I'm in there for that extra layer of security. This is something that happened a few years ago. This was back when I was in college, but it was my senior year. For that school year, I lived in a small and old house a little ways off of campus. It was a pretty typical college neighborhood with a bunch of other similar houses. I shared the two-bedroom house that I lived in with one other person, my roommate named Jason. We had met each other in college and were friends. So an event took place a few months into the school year. Jason and I were both always coming and going from the house. We both had classes at all sorts of random times, and we also both worked jobs part-time as well. So one night, I came back home to the house after a late class. I had been gone basically all day since the morning, because I spent the time in between my classes studying in buildings around campus. After arriving back to the house, I parked out front on the side of the street and walked up to the front door. I went inside and was going to go upstairs and change. However, right when I got inside, something seemed off. The first room in the house was the living room, and it looked a little bit messed up. Also, the door that leads to the basement was wide open, and we always kept it closed. I knew that Jason was gone at work until later, and of course, I figured that he was responsible for the mess and the open door. It was not really like him though, because we were both pretty clean and picked up after ourselves. But obviously, it couldn't be anybody else. I thought maybe he left in a hurry and had been looking for something. Either way, it wasn't too big of a deal. I just picked up the few things that were on the floor, and then I went over and closed the door. I was going to go upstairs and change then, so I walked up and then went to my bedroom. Then I took a quick shower, changed clothes, and then went back downstairs to get something to eat. After going back downstairs though, I saw that the basement door was once again open. This really creeped me out. I had a bad feeling about it immediately, but I thought that maybe Jason had returned home early from work. I called out his name, asking if he was back. He obviously didn't go upstairs, or I would have seen or heard him. But when I called out, I got no response. I decided to go and look in the basement. At our house, we had this old, unfinished basement. We mostly didn't have anything down there except for the washing machine, dryer, and a few boxes. I took like 1 or 2 steps down the stairs. As soon as I did, I immediately saw somebody down there. It was dark, so I didn't get a good look at all. It appeared to be a man though, and somebody who I did not recognize. He was just barely in my sight. After seeing him, I could not believe it. But then he started to turn, and I think to look at me. But right away, I turned around and quickly went back upstairs. Then I closed the door behind me. Then I ran upstairs and went back inside of my bedroom. I closed the door and locked it behind me. After that, I got out my phone and I dialed 911. Right as this was all going on, I started to hear the guy walking around downstairs. I spoke with the 911 dispatcher explaining the situation. But right after I did, I heard the man start to walk upstairs. I just hoped that he wouldn't try to get in my bedroom. My room was the first one at the top of the stairs to the right. Jason's room was a little ways down and to the left, and he also had his door shut. The only other room up there was the bathroom. So after the footsteps reached the top of the stairs, almost instantly they were right outside of my door. I was really nervous. Then they turned and tried the door handle. I'm so happy that my door had a lock on it. When the door didn't open, the guy walked further down the hallway. I heard him opening Jason's door, which was unlocked. Then he went inside there. This really creeped me out because whoever this guy was knew that I must have seen him, and instead of leaving, he chose to go upstairs and seemingly go after me. I did my best to keep calm. I just hoped that the police would arrive shortly. The man stayed inside of Jason's bedroom for probably 2 or 3 minutes. Then he came back out. He seemed to go near the bathroom for a few seconds, then he turned around and headed back towards my room. Except this time, he walked past and went back down the stairs. After going back down, I heard him walking a little, then the sound of the front door opened and shut. I figured that he left, but I still didn't leave my bedroom. Just a few minutes after that, the cops got there. I went down and told them what happened. They looked around, but the guy was gone. I called Jason and told him about it too. He came home a while later, and unfortunately, a few things were stolen from his bedroom. We never found out who did it. Also, I'm pretty sure whoever this guy was just walked right in. We didn't do a very good job of locking our door because we were always coming and going. But after that, we did. I live alone in a smaller house in a busy neighborhood. This is something that happened not too long ago. I remember that one day I was outside doing some gardening. I love plants and I like to take care of the small garden that I have in the front yard. As I was tending to it, I noticed a man walking down the street out front. It's a busy neighborhood like I said, so nothing was unusual there. I didn't recognize the guy, but that was not a big deal either. However, I noticed him walking back from the other direction just about 10 minutes later. Then I saw him again walking back like 5 to 10 minutes after that. The guy didn't really seem to be walking with much purpose either. He was just kind of looking around, and I remember that we made eye contact for a second before he looked away. Just his behavior struck me as a little suspicious. After he walked away that time though, he did not return for the rest of the time that I was outside that day. I forgot all about him until a few days later when I was outside doing some gardening again. When I was out there, I saw him walking by again. This time, he stopped and appeared to be looking at me. I saw him and I stopped, wondering why he was just staring at me. At that point, he started to walk towards my yard. I walked over to him and met him at the edge of my property. The guy said hi and told me that he was a neighbor. I said hi, and then he basically just said bye and walked down the street again. He seemed kind of strange, but I didn't think too much of it. I just went back to gardening. I do remember him walking by again as I was gardening there though. Several days went by and I didn't see him, although I didn't go out gardening on those days. Then, one night, I was woken up very late to a sound. The first thing I remember was hearing this weird noise from a back window leading to the living room. I got up from my bed and went to my bedroom doorway. That's when I heard glass breaking. It wasn't very loud like it was being smashed, but instead quieter. I could still tell that it was being broken though. I realized that somebody was breaking into my house. I closed my bedroom door and locked it, and then quickly got my phone and called the police. I reported a break-in and went to the far back corner of my room away from the door. I sort of heard someone walking in the house, but hoped that they wouldn't go near me. I tried to stay quiet and hide in my room. After maybe 2 or 3 minutes, I heard footsteps in the hallway. They got closer to my bedroom door, and I was terrified. Soon, whoever it was tried the handle, which was locked. After the door didn't open, they slowly walked away. I hoped this meant they were leaving, but it didn't. Just about 2 or 3 minutes after that, I heard footsteps approaching in the hallway again. But before they reached my door, they once again turned around and walked away, this time rather quickly. Around that same time, I also heard cars driving down the street outside. I realized that the police had gotten there. The person in my house tried leaving, but they were caught. It turned out to be the same man who I kept seeing walking by when I was gardening. And as it turns out, he was not even a neighbor. He lived in the next city over, but he had somehow been stalking me for weeks. They found photos of me in his house, some from my social media and others taken of me gardening without my knowledge. I was very creeped out by that, but I'm really glad that the guy was caught. A couple of years ago, it was my senior year of high school. I had just turned 18 and was living with my older brother and my dad. We had recently moved into a beach condo right on the shores of San Diego. It was a strange setup where one unit was on the 3rd floor and the 2nd unit and 1st floor were divided in half, vertically into 2 units. We lived on the side open to the sidewalk. The other side had a gated boardwalk entry and was right next to another condo of similar style. The condo was a bit older and creepy when we moved in. There were 2 master suites and 1 regular bedroom, all on the 2nd floor. Since my brother only came home to sleep, my dad and I each had one of the suites. We were all happy and loved the new place, until I found a door. Again, this condo was a little strange. In my room, there was a sunroom. It had been a balcony at one point, you could tell by the concrete floor and drain in the middle of it, but it had been closed in by large windows. I liked to sit there and do my homework with my cat. She enjoyed the sun, and I enjoyed the view of the ocean. But as much as I had been out there, I never considered moving the bookshelf that had been there since before we moved in. That was until my cat was going ballistic and I noticed her chase a mouse behind it. I told my dad, and we bought a couple of mouse traps. We were going to put them behind the bookshelf and went to move it out of the way. When we shifted it, we saw the door. It was locked and we were never given a key for it. Although we figured it was just a storage closet, my dad and I were both curious, so we asked the landlord. The landlord had no idea what it led to. We did the logical thing and hired a locksmith who opened the door to reveal a hidden fire escape. It was a dark and creepy indoor stairway that led to a door in our shared garage. The only way to get to this door was from the 3rd-story balcony or the door inside our garage. Either way, you had to already be in the building to get to it, so we weren't really worried about it. A few days later, my dad and brother decided to go on a small road trip. They left me behind because I was still in school and drove myself to class anyways. I had stayed home alone many times before. I was used to it and never really got lonely thanks to my cat and small dog. Nobody besides my boyfriend knew that I would be home alone, and nobody besides my dad and myself knew about that door, so I felt rather safe. I went to bed late. I was a night owl, and I cuddled up with my cat and dog and fell asleep while watching a movie on my laptop. I awoke to my small dog freaking out and a person trying to get into my room through that door. My dog attacked them and quite possibly saved my life. At the time, I went back to bed thinking it was all a dream. The next morning, I went to grab my backpack from the sunroom and there was blood everywhere. The door was still open and there was blood leading down the stairs. I called my boyfriend and dad, and then finally the cops and my school to let them know I wouldn't be coming in today. The cops took samples of the blood and pictures of the trail. Then they got a good laugh when I showed them the dog who protected me, and from the looks of it, it took a good bite of the stranger's leg. My dad and brother cut their trip short, and my boyfriend stayed with me until they got back. I was terrified. I couldn't think of anyone who knew about that door, had access to it, and possibly was timing it for my dad and brother to be gone. The cops never came back with anything, and we put the bookshelf back. But it took a long time for me to be able to sleep easily in that room again. The only other people who knew about it was my landlord and the locksmith. Our landlord is in a wheelchair, so it wasn't him, but it very well could have been the locksmith. Who knows what would have happened to me if my dog wasn't there. This is something that happened back when I was a kid. I was 12 years old and I lived with my parents in a pretty average house. So this took place during the summertime. Obviously, I was home from school and I liked to play video games. So on this night in particular, my parents had gone to bed and I stayed up pretty late gaming. By this point, it was probably like 1 o'clock in the morning. I was inside of my bedroom and just about every light in our house was off, except for a small lamp on my desk. I did not have headphones in, but I just had my video games at a pretty low volume. So my bedroom was right off the living room, and the front door was connected to that. As I was sitting there playing video games, I suddenly heard the sound like somebody was trying to open our front door. Of course, it took me by surprise, and instantly I was suspicious. I didn't really consider our neighborhood to have much crime, and nothing like that had ever happened before that I was aware of. So I paused my game and sat there listening. I heard whoever it was tried the door again, and then things were pretty quiet for a few moments. I decided to get up and look at that point. I quietly got up and walked out of my bedroom and into the dark living room. There was just a little bit of light coming in from the windows, which had shades mostly covering them. I walked over and looked through the front window. When I did, I saw nothing at all. Whoever had been at the door was gone now. I didn't know who it was or why they were there. I thought maybe somebody accidentally went to the wrong house. Either way, they were gone now, which made me feel a lot better. So I walked back into my bedroom, sat back down, and continued my gaming. I really wasn't that tired yet. I was already in a habit of staying up late most nights and gaming. But less than 5 minutes later, I heard another noise. It was this strange noise that I don't even really know how to describe. Not quite a scraping sound, but similar. It was coming from the back side of the house and where our back door was. When I heard it, the same feeling from earlier came back. Was somebody trying to break in? I was honestly too scared to go and look. I stayed there in my bedroom, just listening to the noise and hoping that it would stop. I tried thinking of logical explanations, but I really couldn't come up with anything. The noise continued on though, much longer than when the person had tried entering the house through the front door. After several minutes, I didn't know what to do. I considered my options. I could go and wake my parents. I could go to the phone and call the police, or I could go and see what the cause of the noise was. I did not have a cell phone, and there was no phone in my room either. So to do so, I would have to go to the kitchen where the landline was. Ironically, that's also where the back door to the house was. But before I could do anything, I suddenly heard the sound of the back door opening. That was one of the scariest moments of my life. As soon as it happened though, as a reaction, I just bolted from my parents' room. I left my bedroom, ran down the hallway, and then went into their room. I woke them up and said that I heard somebody enter the house. My dad ended up getting up and walking to the doorway. He quietly opened it and seemed to be listening. He must have heard whoever had entered the house walking or something. He told us somebody was inside and then told my mom to call the police. Then my dad shouted loudly that the police had been called, and he also shouted that he was armed. Now, I don't think that my dad had a gun. He certainly didn't have one on him at the time, but I think he was just trying to scare the person off. Surprisingly, it must have worked, because like 15 seconds later, he said that he heard the back door close. We stayed inside the room though until the police got there. Then my parents, as well as me, had to talk to them and answer questions. I told them everything that happened. Unfortunately, I never got a look at the person at all. I couldn't tell you if it was a male, female, or anything about them. The police tested for fingerprints, and they also told us that there had been a few reported break-ins in the general area. Luckily, we didn't have anything stolen. After that, nothing else like that happened. I'm really glad that I was up late playing video games and was able to alert my parents about it quickly. Recently, my cousin Charlie was allowed to sleep over, which he wasn't allowed to do often, as he always had to look after his younger sisters. My parents were out late that night at a concert, so it was just me, Charlie, and my younger brother, who is 8. He stayed upstairs that night, as I made a deal with him that he could stay awake as long as he wanted, just as long as he left me and Charlie alone. So he stayed in his room all night. Charlie and I did the usual stuff, eating food, watching movies, and playing video games. At around 12:30 a.m., Charlie was fast asleep on the long sofa, as we were sleeping in the living room. Since he was taller, he got the larger sofa, leaving me with the small, uncomfortable one. After a while, I realized I wasn't getting any sleep anytime soon, so I turned the TV back on to see if there was anything to watch. The back door leading to my garden was connected to the living room. It had glass windows on it, so I could easily look outside if it wasn't dark and if I hadn't closed the blinds that covered the door. After about a half an hour of watching TV, I began to hear light taps on the back door window. I thought nothing of it, probably just the wind, I thought to myself. After a while, the tapping stopped to my relief. I turned off the TV and just lied there until I began drifting off to sleep. I was awoken by a gentle breeze. I sat up slightly, wondering where this sudden cold was coming from. To my horror, I looked over to the back door, and I began to realize that I either hadn't locked the door earlier or somebody had broken in. I don't remember if I had locked it or not. I crept over to Charlie and quietly shook him awake. After a short while, he slowly woke up and I covered his mouth so that he didn't make a noise. I let him know that I thought somebody was in the house, and we both got up and slowly tiptoed to the stairs. I began to regret not grabbing a kitchen knife or any weapon, in fact, to defend myself. First, we investigated my little brother's room. The room was only illuminated by his TV screen, and he was fast asleep. We checked the bathroom. No one was in there either, and then we walked over to my parents' room. Charlie put on the flashlight for his phone, and we walked to investigate the room. We used the flashlight to light up wherever we needed to look. However, my heart stopped as I heard the door behind us begin to creak open slowly. In a split second, Charlie and I dropped to the floor and snuck under my parents' bed. The sheets covered the bottom of the bed, so we couldn't be seen. I began to pant wildly. Charlie had put his hand over my mouth to stop me, and we both began panicking more as we heard heavy footsteps walking through the room. I couldn't control my breathing, and now neither could Charlie. We just hoped that maybe my parents would get home early or the man would leave. But he didn't. He walked closer to the bed. My heart rushed to my throat, and the footsteps stopped. Charlie peeked under the sheet that blocked our view, and he quickly got back closer to me and whispered, "He's right there." Tears began to roll down my face. I was truly scared for my life. I began to hear the floorboards creak as the man bent down on one knee. We could see his hands on the sheet, and he was ready to pull the sheet up, but for some reason, he let go. Then he walked away from the bed, and we heard him walking down the stairs. We crawled out from under the bed, and only then realized that somebody was knocking on the door. We went to look outside of my little brother's bedroom window, and we saw the blue lights of a police car flashing. We later found out that our neighbors had been smoking in their back garden when they saw somebody climbing over our back gate. Then they called the police. After a check on the premises, the police made it clear that the man was gone. I could tell that Charlie felt relieved, but I just couldn't stop thinking of what would have happened if our neighbors decided to have an early night. I used to work at a Blockbuster Video back in the day. This is when they were really popular and all over the place. I was 17 at the time, and the Blockbuster by my parents' house was one of my first jobs. My time working there was mostly good. I enjoyed Blockbuster and my coworkers because I became friends with a number of them. After I had been working there for a while, I remember that we got a new coworker though. He always seemed a little bit strange and mysterious. I remember that he was around my age, maybe slightly older. His name was actually Justin, but my coworkers always referred to him as Timberlake. It was because of his name, but also because he slightly resembled Justin Timberlake. But that was really just because the guy's hair was dyed blonde, and at the time, Justin Timberlake's also was. But this Justin guy at work was known for being kind of odd, like I mentioned. Personally, in my experiences working with him, he just seemed kind of unfriendly. I never really talked to him or even worked with him all that much. However, one night I worked with him until a little bit later at night. We didn't really talk to each other much from what I could remember, and we both got off of work at around the same time that night. I recall that I drove home back to my parents' house, which was a little over 5 minutes away. It was nighttime and the roads were very quiet. I didn't have to go on any roads that were that busy either, so I noticed that Justin appeared to be driving right behind me the entire way. He was sort of a far ways back though, but every time I would turn, a short time later, I would see his car turning around the corner. As I got closer to my house, I was wondering why he was driving behind me. I didn't think that he lived in my neighborhood, because I knew he hadn't gone to my school. Soon, I came to my street, and he turned onto it after me. When I reached my house though, I pulled into my driveway, and he did not. He kept driving down the street. I went inside and then looked out of the window. A short time later, I saw Justin driving back down, and then he went out of sight. I didn't really know why he did this. It was very strange, but for the most part, I just forgot about it. It was just a few days later when something really crazy happened. It was late at night, and I was the only one who was still up. My parents had gone to bed, and I was in my room. It was probably about midnight. I just remember that out of nowhere, I heard the back door to the house suddenly fly open. I had a bad feeling about it immediately, and was afraid that somebody was breaking in. I heard someone walk into the house, but I told myself that it had to be one of my parents. Maybe they had gone outside without me knowing, because obviously we locked all the doors every night, and I just couldn't imagine somebody would break in. After hearing the person walking around near the back end of the house for a short time, I kept telling myself that it was my dad, but I just had to see for myself. So I left my bedroom and started walking down the hallway and then down the stairs. Soon I reached the main level of the house. When I got there, every light was off. I looked around and then saw him. Justin from work at Blockbuster was standing there inside of our house. I really couldn't believe it. He looked surprised to see me, but I will tell you, I was way more surprised to see him. As soon as he saw me though, he turned around and took off. He ran to the back of the house and then left out the back door. I walked over there, still in shock. The back door appeared to have been pried open with maybe a crowbar, but it had been locked. I then woke my parents and called the police. Justin was long gone, but I knew exactly who he was. He was quickly found, and luckily hadn't stolen anything. I later found out that Justin had somehow heard that my parents were wealthy, I guess from a coworker. Yes, my parents did have some money, and our house was nice, but we weren't filthy rich or anything. I mean, I still worked at Blockbuster to get my own money, but apparently Justin thought that he could rob our house. That also explained why he followed me home, to get my address. I will never forget that crazy experience. This story happened back when I was in high school. It was summertime, and I was going into my senior year, and was living with my parents at home. My older brother was off at college at the time, because he lived there working a job, so it was just me and my parents. I worked a part-time job at a local restaurant to make money, so I worked mostly nights and weekends, and one night I arrived home from work pretty late. This was kind of typical that I would get home late at around midnight or so. I would get home, eat something, unwind for a bit, and then usually be sleeping by 2 a.m. Of course, this was just a routine on nights that I worked late. So I remember that I worked 2 nights in a row. After arriving back home from work on the first night, I got inside, changed, and then sat on the living room couch and had some food. My parents had already gone to bed by now. I was just on my phone and also half watching TV as well. At one point, I got up to get something, and when I was returning to the living room, I noticed a car driving by out the front window. The strange thing about it was the speed of the car. It was driving extremely slow. It was not stopped, but just going really, really slowly. I found this odd. The car passed by the house and kept going. I was interested and I continued to watch it. The car was white, had 4 doors, and appeared to be an early 2000s model. I didn't recognize it. The car went further down the road and then appeared to turn around. After this, it came back down the street, except much faster than before. I assumed it to be somebody who was lost, but the car returned a while later. This was maybe 20 minutes after I had first seen it. The car drove slowly down the street again and went all the way down. Then it came back once again, going extremely slow. I didn't really know what was going on. After that, I did not see the car again for the rest of the time that I was up though. I soon went to bed and didn't think anything more of it. Now the next day, I worked basically the exact same shift at the restaurant. After getting home from work, once more, my parents had already gone to bed. I sat down to have some food again, and like the previous night, not long after, I noticed the same car driving down the street again. I found this to be strange. But after that, the car ended up pulling into our driveway. This was really weird. I wondered what exactly was going on here. After the car parked, I kept watching it out of the window. A man and a woman both got out of it. I didn't recognize them, except they both seemed to walk directly to the back of the house. This was really strange. I walked over to the back side of the house, and as soon as I got there, I saw the man and woman approaching the rear door to the house. That led out to the patio. I moved away from it quickly. Then I heard the sudden sound of glass breaking. When I heard this, I quickly ran into my bedroom. I got out my phone and hit 911. As soon as I did, I heard the man and woman both walking inside. I really didn't want them to go towards my room. I was afraid if they were dangerous or not, and I had no lock on my door. They were not approaching yet, but I feared that they would. Then I had an idea. I quietly turned on the TV in my bedroom and put it to YouTube. Then I searched for an alarm sound, put the volume all the way up, and played it. It sounded as though the house alarm had gone off, except we did not have a house alarm at all. This seemed to actually work, because I heard the back door open less than a minute later. I then went to my parents, and they had already woken up from the noise. I told them what happened, and the police were already on the way. They arrived probably about 5 minutes after this. I told them what I could. The man and woman were both gone though, and unfortunately, I don't know that they were ever found. I'm just glad that my alarm idea worked. Ever since I was a kid, I would work for this old woman who lived down the road from me. I worked there for so long, it got to the point where I could just walk in, ask her for the car, and ride off with it. I did a lot of dog sitting for her because she liked to take long gambling trips out to Vegas and other places out there. By this point, I had been taking care of the dog for a while, and I had the routine down like the back of my hand. Wake up at 6, go down and let him out, feed him, give him his shot, and go home. I did that twice every day for about 2 weeks when I started to notice some weird stuff. Car keys were not where I left them, food cans moved, and little things like that. I just played it off as me being forgetful until one night I was late getting back into town to take care of the dog. I came racing into the driveway and ran to the front door to find that it was propped open just a crack. That already put me on edge, and I slowly entered the house and immediately knew the dog was gone. The only reason I knew right away was because he was blind and barked at the slightest sound. I could also feel a cold breeze coming in, and I went back out and grabbed my deer rifle out of my truck, and I did a room-by-room search of the place. Nobody was inside, but the big glass sliding door that I had never opened once in my years of dog sitting there was wide open, and big boot tracks were in the snow. Luckily, the sheriff picked up the dog, and I was able to get him back that same night. So the next night, me and a friend of mine stayed in the house after taking care of the dog for the night. Both of us sitting in the pitch black, armed with our double-barrel hunting rifle and a crossbow. We waited until right around 12:30 a.m., when we heard what sounded like big feet stomping up the stairs to the front door. Then we saw the door open, and there was a man just standing there. There was a nightlight right by the front door, so we could see someone standing there, but we couldn't make out his face or anything about him other than that it was a big dude. So he was standing there, and I finally mustered up the courage to scream, "Get out of here before I start shooting." He just stood there and stared at us for a few moments, and then backed away and walked into the woods. I called the owner to inform her of what happened. It turned out the guy was known locally. He was a bad guy who would frequently sneak into people's property and take pictures of their animals to make it seem like they were being abused. I changed the locks on the house and took the dog home with me until the woman came home. I didn't sleep well for a long time after that day, until one day this past winter at lunch, me and a different friend were driving down to the grocery store and saw an ambulance and multiple police cars. I came to find out that the guy who we confronted that night was walking on the sidewalk when a passing truck driver had a heart attack and veered off the road and hit him. Both men passed away that day, and while the loss of the driver was sad, the whole town, including myself, slept a little easier knowing that the other crazy man was gone. I don't know how he wasn't in prison for breaking into people's houses. I think he had served some jail time but was free somehow. Back in 2016, I was living with my then boyfriend's family in their home. Each morning, I would wake up and be the only one home. On this morning, I woke up to loud banging and crashing at the back of the house. I decided to call my boyfriend's mom just to make sure that it was her and nothing to worry about. Unfortunately for me, she didn't answer my phone call. Out of curiosity, I peeked through the blinds of my bedroom, which faced towards the backyard. I happened to see the top of someone's head, or what seemed to be a gray beanie. At that moment, my phone rang. It was my boyfriend's mom calling me back. She wasn't home and wasn't sure what the banging was. I asked if her daughter could possibly have forgotten her keys and maybe was trying to get in the back of the house. She told me she wasn't too sure if it was her or not, and that was the end of the conversation. At that point, I was a little on edge. I suffer from anxiety and overthink everything. I decided I might need something to defend myself just in case, and tried to figure out what to do next. I decided to have another peek out the blinds to see what was going on. As I pulled my blinds open, I was looking straight at a young man dressed in all gray. He looked at me dead in the eyes and then just smiled at me. He then proceeded to walk to the back door. At this point, I was panicking. The banging was getting more intense, and I knew that this person was trying to break in, and he knew I was inside now. I stayed in my bedroom and locked the door. The banging finally stopped, and I was thinking that he had finally given up. Then I heard the sliding door that connects to my room roll open slowly. I was really nervous, and I knew I was in some form of danger. My bedroom doorknob slowly rotated, but like I said, I had locked it. I heard a female voice faintly calling my name. It was my boyfriend's sister. It turned out she had been home all along. We came out of our rooms and searched the house to see that the man had nearly succeeded in entering the house. The door frame was torn from the wall, and the sliding door was off the tracks. We called the police and had 2 squad cars to the house within 3 minutes. He was never caught. A couple of weeks later, my license plates were stolen, and my car had been in the driveway of the house the day of the attempted break-in. Weeks and weeks after, I was followed by a young man in a van. He followed me to the gas station and would stop in his car near mine and smiled at me. He would stop in his car in peak hour traffic to get a glimpse of me. He was hanging around the front of my house, the neighbor's house, and the street for weeks following the incident. Everything was reported to the police, and they found the van's registration through the state. The vehicle was registered in a fake name or someone else's name. I don't know how I didn't notice this, but the license plates on the van were my plates that had been stolen from my car earlier. Thankfully, nothing more ever came of this, and the whole ordeal ended after I moved and bought a new car. I have a huge fear of home invasions now and being home alone in general.
Several years ago, I used to live in this apartment with 2 other women. Their names were Amanda and Carly. The apartment was kind of crappy, and we lived on the first floor of 2. The front door opened right up to the outside, and the parking lot was in the back of the building. So the 3 of us met online to get the place, and the apartment had 3 bedrooms, so we each got one. At first, we all got along pretty well, but as time went on, Carly was not a good roommate at all. Amanda was a great roommate. She was friendly and considerate of other people. However, Carly did nothing around the house. She would use our dishes and food and never clean anything up. She would leave things out, and she also never did any other chores around the house. I remember that she would have her boyfriend over a lot as well, and they would have stuff on her TV super loud at all hours of the night. They would also smoke in and out of her room, and it stunk up the whole place. After a couple of months, I remember that I asked her to do her part around the house and be a better roommate. She responded by saying that she pays her share of the rent every month, so she doesn't have to do anything else. It started to become an argument, so I stopped talking to her. I really didn't know what to do. Amanda tried talking to her as well, and was met with pretty much the same result. Sometimes Carly and her boyfriend would be gone for days at a time, which was always nice for us. But overall, she was a terrible roommate, and we didn't like her. One time, when Amanda was gone at work, I had another conversation with Carly. I don't remember what exactly started it, but we ended up arguing about the same old stuff. I know that I was getting on her because she put stuff into the garbage, causing it to overflow, but she didn't take it out, which she never did. Still, she said that she paid the rent so she didn't have to do anything else. Well, I went to take the garbage out to the dumpster myself. When I did, I went around back to the dumpster and then went back to go inside. When I got to the apartment, the door was locked. I didn't have my keys with me because I was just going to be gone for a minute. I knocked on the door, but Carly didn't answer. Luckily, I did have my phone, and I called her, but she kept declining my calls. I remember that after I called her like 10 times, she finally picked up, just to curse at me and hang up. I couldn't get back into the apartment. Amanda wasn't going to be home for hours, and I didn't know what to do. After trying to get Carly to let me back inside for at least 30 minutes, I called the cops. When they got there, things got somewhat resolved. Carly finally let me back in, and claimed that she didn't hear me, which was a lie because I had all the proof of the phone calls. The police told her that she couldn't lock me out because I was on the lease, and then they left. I was really mad at Carly, obviously. But not too long after this, Carly told Amanda and I that she was going to be staying at her boyfriend's for the rest of the lease. By this point, there were 3 months left of our lease. Amanda and I were both very happy to hear it. So she ended up moving all her stuff out of the apartment and was gone. The next roughly 2 months were great. Carly was technically still on the lease and supposed to pay, but she didn't pay her share of the rent when it came around. Amanda and I were not surprised, and after talking to the landlord, we agreed to pay the amount between us. Apparently, Carly didn't respond to him. We would rather do that than have her living with us. She did still have her keys to the apartment though. Well, sometime later, about 2 months after Carly moved out, none of us had seen her or heard from her since. I remember that I was in my room and up late one night, and Amanda was in her room as well. All of a sudden, I heard the sound of glass breaking coming from the living room. I realized that somebody was breaking in. I stayed in my bedroom, which unfortunately did not have a lock on the door. I was about to call the police when I heard footsteps approaching. Then the door suddenly opened up, and I saw Carly standing there. She asked me why I didn't answer the door, but I never heard her knocking or anything. I asked her why she broke into our apartment, because she still had a key. She said she had lost it though. I was really mad that she literally broke our window to get in. She said that she had an argument with her boyfriend and they broke up, so now she was going to move back into the apartment. I told her that she hadn't even paid the rent. She said, what were they gonna do, evict me? I didn't even live here. I didn't know how to respond. I was just glad that our lease was very close to being over at that point. Carly did end up getting evicted though before the lease ended, for breaking the window as well as not paying her share of the rent. After that, I haven't seen her or talked to her since, and I'm glad.